Porcelain shattered against marble. The sound echoed through the mansion like a gunshot, followed by a woman's scream, sharp, furious, defeated. Another nanny stormed out, heels slamming the floor, her voice breaking as she shouted, "That boy is impossible." At the far end of the dining hall sat Noah Whitman, 10 years old, deaf, silent, still. He didn't flinch. He didn't cry. He didn't react. He just tapped his fingers against the table. Once. Twice. Again. No one noticed, except the maid holding a broom in the corner. Clara Williams froze, because that rhythm wasn't random. It was language. In a house filled with wealth, power, and people paid to care, no one had truly listened to Noah Whitman. Doctors called him uncooperative. His father called it defiance. The staff called it a problem. But Clara saw something else. And the moment she responded, with nothing but her hands, Noah did something he had never done before. He looked up. This is the story of the boy who never spoke, the father who refused to listen, and the black maid who changed everything by doing what no one else would. She listened. Before we continue, if you've ever seen someone misunderstood, ignored, or silenced because they were different, take 1 second to tap like and subscribe. Stories like this don't get told unless people choose to listen. Your support helps us give a voice to the ones the world overlooks. Now, let's continue. The Whitman house didn't echo. That was the first thing people noticed when they walked in. Not the marble floors, not the glass walls, not the art that cost more than most homes. Sound simply disappeared. Conversation softened on instinct. Footsteps shortened. Even laughter felt discouraged, as if the walls themselves had learned obedience. At the center of it all lived Noah Whitman, 10 years old, small for his age, brown hair always neatly cut, as if chaos might sneak in through uneven edges. He sat most mornings at the long dining table, hands folded, eyes lowered, while the world moved loudly around him, without ever reaching him. The staff called it defiance. The doctors called it selective withdrawal. His father called it a phase he would grow out of. But Noah wasn't choosing silence. That was the part no one seemed to understand. Deafness isn't the absence of intelligence. It isn't stubbornness. And it certainly isn't emptiness. For many deaf children, the problem isn't that they can't communicate. It's that no one around them speaks their language. Sound had once existed for Noah. Softly, faintly, like a radio losing signal. After his mother died, it faded faster. The specialists explained it with clinical calm, progressive hearing loss. They spoke in charts and timelines, in treatments and expectations. What they didn't talk about was grief, or fear, or how terrifying it is for a child to wake up one day and realize the world has gone quiet without asking permission. Instead, they gave him rules. Sit still. Look at me. Use your voice. When he didn't, notes were written, labels applied, and one by one, the nannies quit. That morning was no different. Porcelain shattered against marble. A plate slipped from trembling hands, exploded at Noah's feet. The nanny screamed, not from fear, but frustration. She stormed down the glass hallway, apron half torn, muttering under her breath that the boy was unreachable. Noah didn't react. He stared at the fragments on the floor and tapped the table. Once, twice, again. To most people, it meant nothing. Just a habit, a tick. But in the corner of the room, a woman with a broom paused mid-sweep. Clara Williams hadn't been hired to notice things. She was there to clean, to stay invisible, to move quietly through a house that preferred people like her unseen. Years of working in other people's homes had taught her a simple rule. Don't draw attention, don't ask questions, don't care too loudly. But Clara had learned something else long before she ever stepped into the Whitman mansion. She had learned that silence is rarely empty. Her younger cousin had been born deaf. Clara remembered how adults spoke around him, as if he wasn't there. How teachers mistook confusion for inability. She remembered learning on her own that hands could speak when mouths failed, that a simple gesture could say, "I see you," when words never came. So when Noah tapped the table, Clara felt it in her chest. Rhythm is often the first language deaf children cling to, before formal sign language, before instruction, before permission. Tapping, repeating patterns, creating structure in a world that no longer makes sound. It's not noise, it's control. Noah wasn't misbehaving. He was regulating himself. Clara stepped closer without thinking. Her heart raced. She knew the rules. No interaction with the child. Margaret Klein, the head housekeeper, had made that clear on Clara's first day. The Whitman household ran on. Hierarchy and kindness, unsanctioned kindness, was treated like a threat. Still, Clara raised her hand, slowly, deliberately. She signed a single word. "Hello." Noah's tapping stopped. His head lifted, eyes wide, breath catching in his chest. For a second, he looked afraid, like a child who's been caught doing something wrong. Then his hands moved, awkward, uncertain, as if reaching for a memory he wasn't sure he was allowed to use. He signed back, clumsy, hesitant. "You see me?" Clara swallowed hard, because that wasn't defiance. That was a child asking if he mattered. From the doorway, a voice cut through the moment. "Miss Williams." Margaret Klein stood rigid, arms crossed, eyes sharp with disapproval. "He doesn't understand those gestures," she said coolly. "Don't confuse him." Clara lowered her hands at once. "Yes, ma'am." She stepped back, broom shaking slightly in her grip. But as she turned away, Noah tapped the table again. 2 taps this time. "A thank you." Clara didn't look back. She couldn't. Not yet. But something had already shifted inside the Whitman house, because for the first time since his mother died, Noah Whitman had been answered in his own language. And someone, finally, had listened. The Whitman mansion ran on precision. Every morning unfolded the same way. Curtains drawn at exactly 7. Breakfast served at 7:30. Silence enforced by habit rather than rule. Staff moved as if rehearsed, gliding past one another without eye contact, without friction. Order was the currency here. Emotion was a liability. And somewhere within that quiet machinery, Noah Whitman was expected to fit. He didn't. After the morning incident, the house felt tighter, watchful. Margaret Klein's heels echoed longer in the corridors, her glances sharper, her instructions clipped. Clara noticed it immediately. She always did when a room shifted. You learn that skill when your survival depends on reading what isn't said. She kept her head down, hands busy, eyes lowered. But Noah watched her. From the staircase, from behind door frames, from the long hallway where light pooled like spilled milk across the floor. He didn't follow her. He didn't wave. He just observed, quiet, alert, absorbing. Most people assume deafness means a lack of awareness. The truth is often the opposite. When sound fades, other senses sharpen. Visual cues become anchors. Small changes, posture, breath, rhythm, carry meaning. Deaf children are often hyper-aware of their surroundings because they have to be. The world doesn't announce itself anymore. You learn to read it. Noah noticed that Clara never rushed, that she didn't speak at him, didn't force her mouth to move exaggeratedly the way others did, that she treated silence like something normal instead of broken. At breakfast, Jonathan Whitman sat at the head of the table, scrolling through emails on his tablet, jaw tight, shoulders tense. He barely looked at his son. When he did, it was with impatience masked as concern. "You need to eat," Jonathan said, voice firm. Noah stared at his plate. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." Noah's hands curled under the table. His breathing quickened. He wasn't ignoring his father. He couldn't hear him. But years of being punished for that truth had trained his body to react with fear. Clara stood near the sideboard, polishing silver she'd already polished twice. She saw it happening. Many deaf children experience anxiety not because of their hearing loss, but because of constant misunderstanding. Imagine being corrected for something you cannot control. Imagine being told you're rude for not responding to a voice you can't hear. Over time, that pressure doesn't teach obedience. It teaches shutdown. Noah's shoulders rose. His foot tapped against the chair leg. Margaret noticed. She always did. Ahem. She cleared her throat loudly. Mr. Whitman is speaking to you. Noah flinched. Before Clara could stop herself, she shifted her weight and raised her hand slightly, just enough for Noah to see from the corner of his eye. Slow, calm. She signed beneath the table line, subtle, hidden from view. Breathe. She counted with her fingers. 1, 2, 3. Noah's breath followed. His shoulders lowered. The panic eased. Jonathan frowned. What is that? Margaret answered too quickly. Nothing, sir. Just movement. Jonathan returned to his screen, already uninterested. The moment passed, but something stayed. Later that afternoon, Clara found Noah in the sunroom, sitting cross-legged on the floor, toy cars arranged in precise lines. He wasn't playing. He was organizing. Pattern soothed him. Order without noise. She dusted nearby, pretending not to notice him, watching her hands. Then one of the cars rolled away, slipping under the table. Instinct kicked in. Clara signed. Careful. A simple gesture, one hand gliding over the other. Noah froze. Then, slowly, as if afraid the moment might disappear, he repeated the sign back. Perfectly. His eyes lit up, not with excitement but relief. Language. Real language. Sign language isn't just a substitute for speech. It's a complete language with grammar, tone, and emotion. For deaf children, learning it early can mean the difference between isolation and identity. But many hearing families avoid it, believing speech alone is the goal. In doing so, they unintentionally rob the child of their first, most natural form of expression. Noah had been living without that bridge. Clara knelt, heart pounding. She signed again. Good. He smiled, not wide, not loud, but real. From the doorway, Margaret Klein watched, her lips pressed thin. That evening, Clara was summoned to the small office off the service hall, the one with no windows. Margaret sat behind the desk, hands folded, posture immaculate. You are here to clean, she said without preamble, not to interfere. I wasn't. Margaret raised a finger. You were seen communicating with the child. Clara swallowed. I was helping him calm down. This household employs specialists, Margaret snapped. You are not one of them. There it was, the line. Clara nodded. Yes, ma'am. Margaret leaned forward. Do you know why the others failed? Clara didn't answer. Because they forgot their place, Margaret said coolly. Remember yours. The meeting ended. That night, alone in the small service room, Clara lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She thought of her cousin, of the years it took before anyone listened, of how much damage silence could do when it was enforced instead of shared. In the dining hall the next morning, Noah tapped the table 3 times. A question. Clara met his eyes from across the room. She tapped back once. I'm here. The Whitman house remained quiet, but it was no longer empty. Something had begun to speak, and it wasn't using sound. By the 3rd day, the house had decided Clara Williams was a problem. Not openly, not yet. The Whitman mansion didn't confront disruption head-on. It observed it, documented it, waited for the right moment to correct it. That was Margaret Klein's specialty. Order wasn't something she enforced loudly. It was something she strangled into existence with rules, silence, and consequences. Clara felt it in the way her name was suddenly spoken aloud. Miss Williams. Clara. Not shouted, not sharp, just frequent enough to remind her she was being watched. She moved carefully now, every step measured. She polished surfaces that already gleamed. She kept her hands still when Noah was nearby. She followed every instruction down to the letter. And still, Noah found her. He always did. Deaf children often form attachments quickly, not because they're dependent, but because trust is rare. When communication is hard won, you hold on to the person who makes it possible. Noah didn't cling. He didn't reach out physically. He just positioned himself where Clara could see him, in hallways, on the staircase near doorways, waiting. That morning, Jonathan Whitman had already left for the office, his departure announced only by the quiet hum of the driveway gates opening and closing. The house exhaled in his absence, but the tension remained. Margaret ran the staff briefing with surgical calm. No unnecessary interaction with the child, she reminded them. Routine is stability. Routine was the word they used when they meant control. Clara stood at the back, eyes lowered. Later, in the library, Noah sat on the floor with a book open in his lap. He couldn't hear the pages turn, but he loved the feel of them, the way the paper whispered against his fingers. Pictures made sense. Faces did not always. Clara dusted shelves nearby. No words passed between them. Then Noah lifted his hand. Slow, careful. He signed a single letter, H, Clara's breath, and caught. Finger spelling, using hand shapes to represent letters, is often the first structured step deaf children take when learning sign language, especially if they've had fragmented exposure. It's precise, intentional, a bridge between written language and expression. Clara hesitated. She knew she shouldn't respond, but she also knew what that letter meant. Help. She signed back. Yes. Noah's eyes filled instantly, not with tears, but relief, validation, the kind that settles deep in the chest. He signed again, faster now, unpolished, urgent, too loud, too many people. Head hurts. Clara knelt without thinking. She didn't touch him. She just stayed at his level. She signed slowly, grounding her movements. Noise hurts even when you can't hear it. This is something many people don't realize. Deafness doesn't mean the absence of sensory overload. Vibrations, visual chaos, pressure, these can be overwhelming, especially for children who have experienced trauma. Noah's panic wasn't misbehavior. It was his body trying to survive. Noah nodded hard. Footsteps echoed behind them. Miss Williams. Margaret Klein's voice was calm, dangerously so. Clara rose immediately. I warned you, Margaret said quietly, eyes flicking to Noah, then back. You are confusing him. No, ma'am, Clara said before she could stop herself. He's communicating. Margaret's lips curved slightly, not a smile. A calculation. This is not your role. Noah needs enough. The word cracked like ice. Margaret gestured toward the door. Office. Now. Inside the small room, the air felt thin. Margaret closed the door carefully, as if noise itself might misbehave. You are crossing boundaries, she said, and boundaries exist for a reason. Clara kept her voice steady. With respect, he's a child. He needs language. Margaret's eyes hardened. This family pays experts millions of dollars, she said. You think they missed something you caught with a broom in your hand? There it was, the truth, unpolished. Clara felt heat rise in her chest. Years of swallowing words pressed against her throat, but she forced herself to breathe. I think sometimes, she said carefully, people hear what they expect to hear. Margaret stood. That was the end. You will finish your shift, she said. After that, we'll discuss your future here. The words were clean, final. That afternoon, Noah waited by the stairs. He saw Clara come out of the office. He saw her shoulders slump just slightly. He didn't need sound to understand what that meant. He tapped the banister. Once. Twice. A question. Clara paused. She wanted to lie. She signed instead. They're angry. Noah's hands shook. He signed something new, something deliberate. If you leave, I go quiet forever. Clara's throat tightened. That's another truth many don't talk about. When deaf children lose their only access to communication, they don't just lose words. They lose hope. Silence becomes a shield, a way to survive abandonment. Clara knelt again. She signed firmly. "You are not broken, and you are not alone." Noah stared at her, eyes wide, memorizing every movement. Because children like him learn fast when the stakes are survival. As Clara walked away, Margaret Klein watched from the far end of the hall, expression unreadable. She had already made her decision, and in a house built on power, someone was about to be removed. But for the first time in Noah Whitman's life, he had learned something no one could take from him. That silence could speak, and someone would answer. The Whitman estate prepared for events the way other homes prepared for storms. Quietly, efficiently, without room for error. That afternoon, staff moved with heightened precision. Crystal glasses were aligned to exact inches. White linens were steamed until they looked untouched by human hands. Floral arrangements were adjusted and readjusted until they achieved what Margaret Klein called acceptable symmetry. Jonathan Whitman was hosting a private luncheon for investors. To the world, it was business. To Noah, it was a battlefield. No one explained events to him anymore. They simply placed him where he was expected to be and hoped compliance would follow. The table was long, the room bright with glass and sunlight. People laughed, spoke over one another, gestured sharply. Even without sound, the vibration alone rattled Noah's chest. He sat rigid in his chair, fingers clenched beneath the table. Clara stood at the far wall, assigned to pour water and disappear. She saw it instantly. Noah's foot bounced too fast. His jaw tightened. His gaze darted from face to face, searching for something familiar in a room full of strangers. The signs of overload were clear. Classic panic response. When deaf children are overwhelmed, it doesn't always look like fear. Sometimes it looks like stillness, right? Before collapse, Jonathan raised his glass. "Gentlemen, let's begin." Noah flinched. His fork slipped from his fingers and clattered against the plate. The vibration shot through him like lightning. His breath hitched. His hands flew up, fingers twitching, signing frantically in a language no one else in the room recognized. "Too much." "Stop. I can't." Margaret stiffened. A few guests glanced over, discomfort flickering across their faces. Jonathan frowned. "Noah." The boy didn't look up. "Enough," Jonathan said, sharper now. Noah's chair scraped as he tried to stand. Panic surged. His hands moved faster, desperate. Clara took a step forward. She didn't think. She didn't plan. She acted. "Miss Williams." Margaret's voice was a warning. Clara ignored it. She crossed the room and knelt beside Noah's chair, careful not to touch him. Her movements were slow, deliberate, designed to pull him back into his body. She signed. "Breathe with me." She demonstrated. In, out. 1, 2, 3. Noah followed. The room went quiet, not because the noise stopped, but because attention shifted. Investors leaned back. Forks paused midair. Jonathan stared at the scene unfolding in front of him. Clara signed again. "You're safe. Look at me." Noah's breathing slowed. His hands dropped to his lap, his eyes focused. The panic ebbed. In its place was something fragile. Trust. A murmur rippled through the table. "What is she doing?" someone whispered. Jonathan stood abruptly. "Who authorized this?" Margaret stepped forward quickly. "No one, sir. I'll handle it." She reached for Clara's arm. Clara stood before she could be pulled away. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't bow her head. "He needed help," she said calmly. Jonathan's jaw tightened. "He has professionals." "He needs language," Clara replied. The words landed harder than she expected. Jonathan stared at her, anger flashing, then something else. Confusion. He had spent years paying experts to explain his son, and here was a maid contradicting all of them with unsettling confidence. "This is inappropriate," he said finally. "Return to your duties." Clara looked at Noah. He was watching her with a fear she recognized instantly, the fear of being abandoned again. She signed to him quietly. "I'm still here." Noah nodded once, Margaret escorted Clara out of the room, gripped tight on her elbow. "You've crossed the line," she hissed. "Publicly." Clara said nothing. That evening, the house returned to its controlled quiet, but the damage was done. Whispers moved through the corridors faster than sound ever could. The investors had seen it. Jonathan had seen it. And Noah had felt it. Later, Clara found an envelope placed neatly on her cot in the service quarters. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Effective immediately, your services are no longer required. No explanation, no discussion, just removal." Clara sat down slowly, the paper trembling in her hands. She expected tears. They didn't come. Instead, a deep ache settled in her chest. She had known this was coming. What she hadn't expected was the soft tapping at the door. She opened it to find Noah standing there in pajamas, eyes wide, hands shaking. Margaret's voice echoed faintly down the hall, distracted by a phone call. Noah signed quickly, urgently. "You're leaving," I heard. Clara knelt, heart breaking. "Yes," she signed gently. Noah's breathing quickened. His hands moved faster now, forming something new, something deliberate. He tapped her wrist. Once, twice, 3 times. Then again, a pattern. Clara frowned, concentrating. He wasn't tapping randomly. He was counting. Her blood ran cold. Noah tapped again, slower this time, eyes locked on hers. Tap, 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 tap. Clara's mind raced. Her cousin had taught her this once, as a game. Rhythm could carry meaning. Code could hide inside silence. Clara swallowed hard. "Noah," she whispered without sound, signing carefully. "What are you saying?" Noah's hands trembled, but his rhythm stayed steady. And for the first time, Clara understood. This wasn't panic. This was a message. And whatever Noah Whitman was trying to tell her, it wasn't about noise. It was about the truth they didn't want him to speak. Clara didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her narrow bed long after the service quarters fell quiet, replaying the rhythm in her head. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, tap. The pattern refused to fade, pressing against her thoughts like a bruise you keep touching to confirm it's real. Patterns mattered. They always had. When Clara was a teenager, her cousin had taught her that silence could be shaped. That hands could speak, yes, but so could rhythm. Morse code, he'd called it, laughing like it was a game. "Every letter has a pulse," he'd said. "You just have to learn how to listen." At the time, Clara hadn't understood why he was so serious about it. Now she did. She grabbed a pen in the back of an old envelope, scribbling lines and dots the way he'd shown her. Short taps, long taps, pauses. Her chest tightened. HELP. Clara froze. She read it again, slower this time. Help. Her breath caught, sharp and shallow. Noah hadn't been panicking. He hadn't been guessing. He'd been asking. She pressed her palm to her mouth to keep from making a sound. Children don't invent codes in moments of fear unless they have learned to hide their truth. They don't choose rhythm unless words have failed them too many times. Whatever Noah knew, whatever he had discovered, it was something the adults around him didn't want said out loud. By dawn, Clara had made her decision. She packed her things quickly. There wasn't much. 2 changes of clothes, a worn notebook, a phone charger with frayed edges. She folded the termination letter and tucked it into her bag, not as proof, but as fuel. People like Margaret Klein counted on quiet, exits, on shame doing the work for them. Clara had been quiet long enough. She waited until the morning shift change, timing it the way she'd learned to time everything in other people's houses. Guards rotated at the front gate. Deliveries arrived at the side entrance. The mansion woke in predictable waves. She slipped back inside through the service corridor she'd cleaned every day for weeks. The house smelled the same. Lemon polish, money, restraint. She moved carefully, heart pounding, past the kitchen and up the back stairs. The wing where Noah slept was still dim, curtains drawn. Silence pressed heavy against the walls, the kind that wasn't peaceful anymore, the kind that warned you to turn back. Clara didn't. Noah stood at the end of the hallway, barefoot, pajamas wrinkled, eyes ringed with exhaustion. He looked smaller without the formality of the house around him, like a child who'd wandered out of a dream. He saw her and froze. Then his hands moved. "You came back." Clara knelt in front of him, tears blurring her vision. She signed back, steady despite the tremor in her chest. "I'm here. Tell me." Noah hesitated. His gaze flicked toward the closed doors lining the hall, offices, rooms, places he wasn't allowed. Then he tapped again, slower now. Careful. Tap, tap, pause, tap, long pause, tap. Clara followed, translating in her head, the letters assembling like a lock clicking open. "They're lying." Her stomach dropped. Noah signed next, more urgently. "They say I'm broken. I wasn't. Not at first." Clara's hands shook as she answered. "What do you mean?" Noah led her quietly down the hall to the glass-walled study. The door was ajar, the light inside still on. Someone had been there late. Papers lay scattered across the desk. Charts, notes, medical forms. Noah pointed. Clara stepped closer, eyes scanning words she wasn't meant to see. Behavioral compliance, sedative trial, increased dosage recommended. Her chest went tight. Some medications used to manage behavior in children, especially off-label sedatives, can have devastating side effects. In rare cases, prolonged misuse can damage hearing, balance, cognition. It's a risk doctors are supposed to disclose. Parents are supposed to understand. Clara looked down at Noah, heart hammering. "Did they give you medicine?" He nodded. "After Mom died," he signed. "They said I was difficult, loud inside." Clara swallowed hard. "Did it hurt?" Noah's fingers curled. My ears rang. Then everything faded. Footsteps echoed somewhere down the corridor. Clara's instincts screamed. She pulled out her phone and hit record, slipping it into the open drawer beside the desk clock, camera angled toward the doorway. Her hands moved quickly but quietly, muscle memory from years of needing to disappear on command. Voices approached. Margaret Klein's first. "I told you this would come back on us," she said sharply. Another voice answered. Male, older, impatient, the estate. Physician. "You followed the protocol you were given," he said. "But the dosage was aggressive." Margaret scoffed. "Jonathan wanted results. The merger needed stability." "And the child?" the doctor asked. A pause. "He needed to be manageable." Clara's breath stopped. The doctor sighed. "The auditory damage wasn't inevitable. It was caused." Margaret's voice hardened. "Watch your words." "Watch yours," the doctor snapped back. "You silenced him." Clara felt the room tilt. She had enough. Footsteps retreated. The corridor fell quiet again. Clara retrieved her phone, heart racing. She knelt in front of Noah, hands steady now despite the storm inside her. "We're going to make them listen." Noah's eyes widened. "They won't." Clara signed firmly. "They will. Not because they want to. Because the truth is louder than money." Noah hesitated, then nodded. Outside, the mansion woke fully. Doors opened. Voices murmured. Life continued as if nothing had changed. But inside that glass-walled study, something irreversible had happened. The silence had cracked. And this time it wasn't Noah Whitman who was afraid. It was the people who had built an empire on keeping him quiet. Clara didn't leave the mansion right away. She stayed still, kneeling in the study long after the voices faded, long after the house resumed its careful breathing. The phone in her hand felt heavier now, like it carried more than sound, like it carried consequence. Noah watched her closely. Children know when adults are about to make decisions that will change everything. Clara signed slowly, deliberately, grounding herself as much as him. "What they did to you was wrong." Noah's hands trembled. "They said it was help." Claire's throat tightened. That was the cruelest part. Harm wrapped in the language of care. When authority speaks confidently enough, even pain starts to sound reasonable. She signed back. Help never takes your voice. Noah looked down, processing. Years of being told he was difficult, ungrateful, broken. Those lies didn't disappear just because the truth showed up. They clung. They nested. Footsteps echoed again, louder this time. Purposeful. Clara's instincts flared. She reached for Noah's hands, just brushing his fingers with hers, not holding, not restraining. Present. We can't stay here, she signed. Not like this. Noah nodded. He already knew. They moved quickly, but quietly, slipping back into the service corridor. Clara kept her body between Noah and the open spaces, guiding him the way you guide someone through a crowd, by reading movement, not sound. At the back entrance, Clara crouched to his level. I have proof, she signed. But proof alone isn't enough. Noah frowned. Why? Because powerful people don't fall in private. Clara replied. They fall when everyone is watching. That was something she'd learned the hard way. Years earlier, she'd worked for a hotel where supervisors skimmed wages and threatened workers who complained. Complaints filed quietly disappeared. Only when a guest recorded the confrontation and it went public did anything change. Silence protects power. Noise challenges it. But Noah couldn't make noise. Not the way the world expected. Clara signed. We'll let them hear you another way. Noah hesitated, fear flickering across his face. They'll be angry. Clara nodded. Yes, that honesty mattered. But they're already hurting you. They stood there for a moment, the weight of the decision settling between them. Then Noah tapped Clara's wrist. Once. Twice. A question. Will you leave me? Clara felt something inside her break open. She signed firmly. No. That afternoon, Clara left the estate for the second time, but not as someone dismissed. This time she left with intention. She went straight home, locking the door behind her, curtains drawn. She uploaded the recording to 3 different secure locations, emailed a copy to herself, and saved it on a sheet. Flash drive she taped inside a book. Redundancy mattered. People who expose truth don't get second chances. Then she sat at her small kitchen table and planned. The Whitman merger gala was in 2 days. Everyone who mattered would be there. Investors, board members, media. Jonathan Whitman would stand on stage and talk about innovation, integrity, family. Cameras would roll, screens would glow, and Noah would be present. Clara knew because Margaret Klein had mentioned it often. The image of the devoted father with his troubled son played well with investors. Sympathy translated into trust. Trust translated into stock stability. They had used Noah's silence as branding. They had never imagined he might speak. The next day passed in a blur of preparation. Clara practiced with Noah in secret, meeting him in the only place he felt safe, the garden behind the east wing, where hedges muffled vibration and the world slowed. She didn't teach him new signs. She didn't rush. She reminded him of what he already knew. Your hands are your voice. Sign language isn't about speed. It's about clarity, intention, emotion. The face matters as much as the hands. Meaning lives in movement and expression combined. Noah practiced signing what he felt. They didn't listen. I was scared. It hurt. Each sentence came haltingly at first, then steadier. Clara also prepared something else. She set up her phone with a live transcription app designed for accessibility, one that translated sign language into text using camera recognition and manual input. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. It just needed to be seen. The night before the gala, Clara lay awake again. Not from fear this time, but from clarity. She knew what she was risking. She knew what people like Margaret Klein did when their control slipped, but she also knew something else. Once truth is witnessed, it can't be unwitnessed. The evening of the gala arrived dressed in light and sound. Limousines lined the drive. Flashbulbs popped. Music pulsed through the mansion, vibrating through the floor. Inside, crystal chandeliers glowed like frozen fireworks. Jonathan Whitman stood near the stage, flawless in a tailored suit, greeting guests with practiced warmth. Noah sat beside him, small and silent, hands folded tight in his lap. Margaret Klein scanned the room like a sentry. Then she saw Clara. For a split second, her composure cracked. Clara moved through the crowd calmly, not rushing, not hiding. Her phone rested in her palm, camera ready. The flash drive was secured in her pocket. She met Noah's eyes across the room. He straightened. Jonathan stepped up to the microphone. "Tonight," he began, voice smooth and confident, "we celebrate growth, stability, and the values that define the Whitman legacy." Clara moved closer to the stage. Margaret started toward her. Too late. Clara raised her phone, connected it to the system the way she'd practiced, and looked at Noah. She signed one final question. "Are you ready?" Noah swallowed. Then he stood, and in a room built on power, money, and carefully curated silence, the boy they had tried to manage instead of understand lifted his hands. The truth was about to speak, and this time, everyone would see it. The ballroom didn't quiet all at once. It happened in ripples, conversations faltering, laughter thinning, the soft clink of glasses dying mid-air. People sensed something was wrong before they understood what it was. Power rooms are like that. They feel disruption before they hear it. Jonathan Whitman paused mid-sentence. His smile stayed in place, but his eyes flicked toward the movement near the stage. Noah was standing. That alone was unusual. He rarely stood without being prompted, rarely drew attention, rarely did anything unscripted. For a moment, Jonathan felt irritation rise, an old reflex. Then he saw his son's hands. They were shaking. Clara stepped into view beside him, close, enough to be grounding, far enough not to shield. She didn't touch Noah. She didn't speak. She simply looked at him and nodded. "You're not alone." Noah lifted his hands. The first sign came slowly, carefully. His fingers formed shapes that felt heavy with meaning. On the massive screen behind the stage, text appeared. "You all talk. No one listens." A gasp rippled through the room. Jonathan turned fully now. "What is this?" he demanded, voice tight. Noah didn't look at him. He signed again, faster this time. Stronger. "I did not choose this." The translation lagged by half a second, then caught up, glowing stark white against the black screen. Margaret Klein pushed through the crowd. "Turn that off," she hissed at the technicians. "Now!" Hands hovered over controls. Clara raised her phone slightly, just enough for the nearest camera to catch it. The recording began to play. Margaret's voice filled the ballroom, sharp and unmistakable. Jonathan wanted results. The merger needed stability. A murmur spread. Heads turned. Phones lifted. Jonathan's face drained of color. "That's fabricated," he snapped. "This is inappropriate." The doctor's voice followed, calm, damning. The auditory damage wasn't inevitable. It was caused. Silence slammed into the room like a physical force. Noah signed again, his movements fluid now, anger and grief threading together. "They said I was broken. I wasn't. They made me quiet." The words burned across the screen. Jonathan took a step forward. "Son." Noah stepped back. That small movement carried more weight than any shout ever could. Clara moved closer, placing herself slightly between father and child, not in defiance, but protection. Her voice stayed calm when she finally spoke. "He's been trying to tell you," she said evenly. "You just never learned how to listen." The room erupted. Investors shouted questions. Journalists surged forward, microphones raised. The PR team scrambled, whispers turning frantic. Margaret stood frozen, eyes darting, calculating exits. Jonathan looked around him, at the faces that had once nodded at his every word. For the first time, none of them were listening to him. They were listening to his son. Noah's hand slowed. His final signs were deliberate, precise. I needed a father. I got a brand. The translation appeared. A few people covered their mouths. Someone swore under their breath. Jonathan's shoulders sagged. Security moved toward the stage, uncertain, unsure who they were meant to protect now. Clara met their eyes without flinching. "He's finished," she said. Noah lowered his hands. For a moment, the silence felt different. Not heavy, not enforced. Honest. The next morning, the headlines landed like thunder. Billionaire accused of covering up son's disability. Black Maid exposes Whitman scandal at merger gala. Deaf child's testimony shakes. Corporate empire. Stock prices plunged before noon. Board members released statements distancing themselves. Lawyers issued denials that fooled no one. Margaret Klein resigned before the sun rose, her statement citing misunderstandings. By evening, it was replaced with footage of her being escorted into a courthouse. The doctor turned himself in 2 days later. Jonathan Whitman retreated from public view, his resignation announced quietly, the way all powerful men prefer to fall. But Noah didn't retreat. He sat in a quiet room with Clara that afternoon, sunlight spilling across the floor, hands resting loosely in his lap. "Did I do wrong?" he signed, uncertainty creeping back in. Clara shook her head. "You told the truth." Noah considered that, then signed something else. "Truth is loud." Clara smiled, eyes wet. "Yes," she signed back. "It is." Outside, the world argued, analyzed, condemned. Inside, something gentler took root. For the first time in his life, Noah Whitman wasn't silent because he was afraid. He was quiet because he was finally at peace. And for Clara Williams, the cost of being heard had been high, but worth every breath, because the truth had stood up, and it hadn't needed sound at all. The noise didn't stop when the cameras did. It followed them home in headlines, in commentary panels, in opinion pieces dissecting every frame of Noah's hands in slow motion. The world argued about liability, ethics, branding, stock prices. Everyone had something to say. But inside the small therapy room at the community center across town, there was only quiet. Not the kind that presses down, the kind that makes space. Noah sat at a round table, feet swinging just above the floor, fingers tracing the grain of the wood. Across from him sat his father. Jonathan Whitman looked different here. No tailored suit, no assistants hovering at the edges, no glass walls. Just a man in a wrinkled button-down, sleeves rolled unevenly, hands resting on the table like he wasn't quite sure what to do with them. Clara stood. Between them, not as an employee, not as an intruder, but as a bridge. Jonathan cleared his throat, then stopped. Old habits. He glanced at Clara, uncertain. She nodded gently and signed to Noah. He wants to try. Noah watched his father carefully. Jonathan lifted his hands. They shook. Learning sign language as an adult is humbling. There's no hiding ignorance when your hands are the words. Every mistake is visible. Every pause exposed. For a man who had spent his life mastering rooms, this felt like stepping onto a stage without knowing the script. Jonathan signed slowly, awkwardly. "Hello." The word came out crooked, fingers misaligned. Noah blinked, then smiled. A real smile. Wide. Unguarded. Clara corrected Jonathan gently, adjusting his hand position. "Slower," she said softly. "Let your hands listen before they speak." Jonathan tried again. "Hello." This time it was right. Noah answered immediately. "You look tired." Jonathan laughed, short, surprised. It escaped before. He could stop it. Clara translated, watching the moment land. "I am," Jonathan admitted quietly. "I think I've been tired for a long time." Noah's expression softened. They continued slowly, word by word, gesture by gesture. Jonathan learned what Noah had been trying to say for years, that loud rooms hurt, That people's mouths moving without meaning was confusing. That being watched without being understood felt worse than being ignored. Jonathan listened. Not with his ears, with his hands. Between lessons, the investigations unfolded. Lawyers contacted Clara. Advocates reached out. Deaf organizations shared Noah's story, not as a spectacle, but as a warning, as proof of what happens when accessibility is treated as optional. Clara declined most interviews. She wasn't interested in becoming a symbol. She was interested in making sure Noah never went unheard again. Weeks passed. Jonathan moved out of the mansion. The house went dark, its gates closed, its fountains dry. The silence there felt different now, empty, stripped of power. One afternoon, Jonathan knocked on Clara's apartment door. He came alone. No cameras, no lawyers, just a man holding a folded envelope and a small notebook. "I don't know how to say this yet," he said quietly. Clara stepped aside, letting him in. Jonathan opened the notebook. Inside were shaky drawings of hand signs next to written words, corrections, crossouts, practice. "I've been learning," he said. "Badly, but I'm trying." Clara nodded. "That's how it starts." He slid the envelope across the table. Inside was a letter, not a check. An apology, not polished, not public, just honest. "I can't undo what I did," Jonathan said, "but I want to build something that doesn't repeat it." He paused. For him, and for others. The idea took shape quietly. Not a foundation bearing his name, a center, run by deaf educators, staffed by people who understood that accessibility wasn't charity, it was necessity. A place where children like Noah didn't have to prove they were worth listening to. Clara didn't answer right away. She looked at Noah, who was sitting on the floor nearby, teaching a younger boy how to sign his name. Noah noticed her watching and signed. "You're thinking hard." She smiled. "I'm thinking about the future." Noah signed back. "Make it quiet, but good." Clara laughed softly. Months later, the building opened. It wasn't grand, no marble, no chandeliers, just wide windows, open rooms, and walls filled with moving hands. A banner hung above the entrance. "Listening is an act of love." Jonathan stood at the back during the opening, not on the stage. Noah stood front and center, confident, calm, hands moving freely as he welcomed families. Clara watched from the side, heart full. This was what change looked like. Not punishment, not spectacle, but understanding made permanent. And in that room, full of motion and meaning, silence finally meant what it was always supposed to mean: peace. The room filled slowly. Parents arrived holding hands with children who signed instead of spoke. Some were nervous, some excited, some simply relieved to be somewhere they didn't have to explain themselves. The walls were bright, the chairs mismatched, the air calm. No one rushed, no one shushed. This place wasn't quiet because it demanded silence. It was quiet because it respected it. Noah stood near the front, adjusting the strap of his backpack like he'd done every morning since the center opened. He was taller now. Not much, but enough that Clara noticed. Children grow fastest when they feel safe. Across the room, Jonathan watched him, not from a distance this time. He stood close, hands loose at his sides, waiting. Clara stepped forward and clapped once, not loudly, just enough for attention. Then she raised her hands. The room followed. "Good morning." Dozens of hands replied in unison. Noah grinned. He moved to the center and lifted his hands, confident now, unafraid of being seen. "My name is Noah," he signed. "I used to think silence meant no one cared." The room stilled, not frozen, but focused. I was wrong. Clara felt her chest tighten. "Silence just means you're waiting for someone who understands." Jonathan swallowed hard. Noah looked at his father. "You didn't listen before," he signed. "But you are learning." Jonathan nodded, hands shaking slightly as he signed back, slower but sure. "I am. and I'm sorry." Noah studied him for a moment, then nodded once. Forgiveness doesn't always arrive like a wave. Sometimes it comes like a door left unlocked. After the session, children scattered through the halls, hands flying, laughter silent but bright. Clara stood by the doorway, watching something she never thought she'd see, a room where no one was invisible. Jonathan approached her quietly. "You didn't just help my son," he said. "You changed how I see the world." Clara smiled gently. "He changed it himself. I just listened." Jonathan nodded, accepting the truth in that. Outside, sunlight spilled across the courtyard. A small plaque had been placed near the entrance, simple and unpolished. "Every hand has a voice." Noah ran past Clara, then stopped and turned back. He raised his hands, slow and deliberate. "I see you." Clara felt tears gather, unashamed. She signed back. "I see you too." In a world that had tried to silence him, Noah Whitman had found something stronger than sound. He had found understanding. And in doing so, he gave it back to everyone who had ever waited to be heard.